We're going to be talking about lighting and shadows. I love teaching about lighting and shadows. There's a lot of theory that goes along with it. There's a few things that we want to keep in mind. Number one is your color, because shadows are not just shadows. When we're thinking of them in color, we want to think of what color is your light. So your light color will determine your shadow color. That's something that not everybody talks about, right? So if we have yellow light, then our shadow color is going to be blue. Light color determines shadow color. Based on the color of the light, the shadow will be the complement. This is based on the RGB color wheel. For those who don't know, there are a bunch of different color wheels. RGB is the one that deals with light. That's your additive color. So in the RGB color wheel, your primary colors are now red, green, and blue. Say if we had a yellow object, adding on our shadows on top, if we use that kind of bluish shadow, then yes, the shadow does kind of look almost brownish. It kind of goes into a dull yellowish down here, which is, you know, that's just because of the way that the colors interact. However, if the light itself is yellow, the shadow will be blue. Let me give you an example of that. This shadow right here is like a bluish color. The light color is yellow that comes from it. It's like this color, right? This shadow is yellowish. It's almost greeny. And that's because the color of the light is like a purple, right? That's from the neon light. So based on the color of the light that it starts from, the shadow will be the complement. So that's something you want to kind of think about. Number two is your intensity. How bright are your lights? Determines how objects are affected. So this is light concentration. How much of the surrounding area is affected. Right, so how bright are your lights? Not every single light that is produced will create a shadow. Not every single light will create bounce light either. Depends how bright this light is. If we are talking about the sun is obviously going to cast shadows because the sun is the brightest thing ever. So the sun is a very, very intense light. So it's going to cause light everywhere. It's going to cause shadows everywhere. It's going to affect everything that it touches. Say if you've got a glowing button, that glowing button might not light up things in the room, right? You might just have a little spotlight in the corner, right? So how intense this light is will affect A, how you draw it, B, it will affect how much it affects. So if you have like just a tiny little light, it probably won't create a cast shadow, probably won't create too much bounce light, if any. So you got to be careful about where your lights are coming from and how much they will actually affect. Number three, proximity. How close is your light to objects / how close are your objects to one another? So this determines shadow concentration, size, and AOE. AOE stands for area of effect. But envision with me. If you take a flashlight, turn that on, right? If you move your hand closer to the flashlight, less of the light is going to peek out through the hand. And that shadow that's going to be against the wall is going to get bigger because you're covering up more of that light source. The edges of your shadow are also going to get fuzzier because your objects are farther apart from one another. Think of the sun and think of a cloud passing over the sun. You notice when that shadow comes around, it's very gradual. It just slowly gets darker. Say if we have our hand and it gets closer to the wall. The closer that our hand gets to the wall makes the shadow on the wall a lot more concentrated because those two objects are closer together now. So when two objects are closer together, the area of effect of your shadow becomes a lot more concentrated. But if you're closer to your light source, that shadow becomes a lot more dispersed and farther away. Proximity is also important for shadows that are not caused by light sources. When you are illustrating something, not every single shadow that you create is because of a light source. Sometimes it is literally only due to proximity. Say if you've got like creases in your fabric, because the two edges of the fabric are close to each other, it's going to create a shadow no matter what. If you clasp your hands together for me real quick, you kind of just give yourself a handshake or something, you notice that in between your fingers, where your palms are touching, all that fun jazz, there's automatically going to be a shadow there because the two sides of those two objects are so close together that no light's going to enter their angle. So light sources don't matter with those types of shadows. That's called ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion is a very digital artist term, but those kinds of shadows are the ones that are quote unquote baked in to your objects, and your light source does not matter in that case. Okay, so I didn't write any of that down. It's one of those things that eventually it'll make sense as you continue with it. So number four, light placement. Where's your light source? You'd think that this one would be first, but it's not. This determines cast shadow direction. We've got a little sphere here. Our light source is coming from up here. Where's our shadow gonna be? What direction? Bottom right. Yes, so our shadow's gonna be over here. On the sphere, if our light source is down here, where's our shadow gonna be? Kind of around the top area right up here. That's literally it. Light placement, that's where the shadow's gonna go. If your light is on one side, shadow's gonna be on the opposite side. How that light is placed down is gonna change depending on the type of shape it is. A sphere is gonna have, a very gradual shadow, right? If you start from one side, because all of the edges and sides are very, very rounded, a shadow's gonna be very gradual. It's gonna be very different if it's a cube, right? A cube, we have our hard, sharp edges. So if we have a light source here, the top of the cube might be slightly lighter. This side might be slightly darker. The other side's gonna be completely dark. The shadow's gonna be coming from back here. So a cube is very hard edged. Number 5, what's blocking the light? So light placement is what direction the shadows are going to be. What's blocking the light will determine what actually creates them. Not every little edge that you draw will create a shadow. A lot of things that I see with younger artists, like when they draw robots, they have little bits of plating on the robots. That plating is not enough to cast a shadow. It's not enough to cast a really big shadow on your object. In that case, you're gonna have to come up with the edge that it takes up, right? So say if we have like a shoulder plate, if it's got like a little divot here, right? I see a lot of people do this. If it's directly connected onto there, right, that's not gonna create a shadow. It's not a big enough divot. If you want it to create a shadow, you're gonna have to make it more three-dimensional, take it off of the edge of the arm, and then it'll create a bit of a shadow. Not a crazy amount, but enough where you can tell that it's, you know, a three-dimensional thing coming off of the shoulder. If it is directly connected there, it's not gonna create a shadow. It's not. Other things that you'll see, right? Translucent things, their shadows will look different compared to something that's opaque. Think of a piece of Jello. Let's look at the blue ones for a sec. Those ones are a little bit better. So if you take a look at those, the shadows, because it's translucent, the shadows still have a bit of light peeking into them, and that's just because the light is not being completely blocked. It is being dispersed. So the light that is hitting the side, because you can see that the light source is coming from here, the light that is hitting the side of the Jello, it's still like being blocked by the Jello, but not completely. So there's still some light that peeks through onto the shadow. So what's blocking the light and how it's being blocked is something that you have to keep in mind when you're doing your shadows, because not everything will block shadows the exact same. Last two, number 6, primary light. What is your brightest light? All right, so this tends to be the sun or room light, but not always. So this determines majority of shadows. That's the light that will cause the majority of your shadows. 99% of the time it's going to be a sun or a room light. It is whatever is going to create the majority of the cast shadows on your film. If they're shooting a film, you know how they have like lights everywhere just to like make sure that the shadows are pointing in the correct direction? That's what we're thinking of, right? What is your primary light? 99% of the time it's going to be the sun. So that means 99% of the time your light source is going to be straight overhead. Straight overhead or to the side. So yeah, this determines the majority of your shadows because your primary light is going to be your most powerful light. So whatever your primary light is, that is what you'll be focusing on the most. So your secondary / your bounce light, what other light sources are affecting your object or subject? Their reflections, minor glows. This is the less powerful light. There might be other light sources. Light sources aren't necessarily there's like a little glowing things around you. It could just be reflection. If you're in the water on like the beach or something, the water is going to reflect the sun as well. It's going to create a bit of a blue bounce light that hops onto your character. You might even get like the water ripples on the skin of the character, depending on where they are. So that's considered a secondary light. Minor glows, though, are also something. So say if we have those buttons, maybe those buttons are more powerful. Maybe we have that lightsaber, right? The lightsaber is going to be a secondary light, most likely. And those will most likely pop up inside of your shadows because it's another point of light. Your secondary lights are the ones that give more energy to your piece, mostly. If not a minor glow, then it's going to be a reflection. If you have your hand down on a table or something, you'll kind of see the reflections bouncing back up onto your hand, right? And that creates this nice sense of realism. So with this one, we can kind of see how I did it with the hair. We have our big, bright primary light source. It's coming from the back over here. We have the reflections of the shirt that come back onto the kid, right? And you can kind of see it touching the edges of his hair. You can see a bit of blue coming from the carpet that reflects back onto the skin, right? Reflects back onto the cast a little bit, right? Without it, it would look a little bit more empty. And this one, you just get a lot of hard edge shadows. You have one light source that is coming from up here. It's not very bright. The one down here is also not extremely bright, but the one up here is still overpowering the blue one because the blue light's area of effect not as intense. It's just affecting this little area here, right? This orange light that's coming from above is affecting absolutely everything within the composition. So we need to make sure that that one overpowers a little bit more. So your secondary or bounce light is your less powerful light. So if we were to actually draw this on a skin ball, a ball of flesh real quick, it's a weird one, but it is like a flesh.
If you'd like to support the channel and the creation of free arts education, become a member on Patreon.
So if we were to do that, or let's say that the light color is yellow, so let's go with something a bit more blue. So if this is just our normal shadow, I'm not going to blend in this one. I'm just going to kind of generally show you how this works. So if I don't blend in any of this, it's right here, light source, right? Light source coming through. This little section, I'm doing skin in particular because skin has is slightly translucent, so we have some extra bits. Translucent stuff has this thing called SSS, subsurface scattering. And what subsurface scattering does is it's the little bit of extra translucency that the skin has. You get to see kind of, it penetrates the first layer of skin a bit, so you get to see a bit of like the flesh underneath. The best way to describe it is if you've ever had like a flashlight, you put your hand over the flashlight, you see the red bits poking through your skin, that's subsurface scattering. So anything translucent will do that. This shadow, there's a couple names for it. I think some people call it the core shadow. What I was told was the Terminator. That's not a joke. So the terminal shadow or the Terminator, it is the darkest part of your shadow. We kind of opened that sphere up again. The Terminator or the core shadow is this dark ring. It is the darkest point on your sphere or anything that is round. Your Terminator will be the darkest point. This will just be your normal cast shadow. So this is just a shadow that is a result of the light source. And then this one down here would be your bounce or second light. Right, so if I had to put an order to it, that is how we think.
Join a virtual class to learn live from our professional artists. Get creative assignments, individual guidance, and real-time feedback on your artwork. Start today and level up your practice. If you learned something new, like and share this with a fellow art nerd. If you love receiving quality and free arts education, subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, here's a couple other videos you can check out next.